Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is a live recording of the Uncommons podcast, and I'm lucky to be joined by Catherine McKenna, who has a very impressive CV. You will know her as the former Environment Minister. She is also the founder and CEO of Climate and Nature Solutions, a consultancy focused on all things in environment and nature protection. And you may or may not know, but she's also the chair of a UN expert group that gives advice to the Secretary General on net zero solutions. So thank you for coming to Beaches East York.
It's great to be here. Hello, everyone. And special shout out to the guy who came from all the way from Bowmanville. That's awesome. Anyone from Hamilton? That's where I'm originally from. All right, nice. We got a shout for Hamilton. Woohoo!
So I ran down a few things you've accomplished over the years, but you are also the author of Run Like a Girl. You mentioned a book launch last night and here in Toronto, but I attended your book launch in Ottawa, and you can all pick up a book on the way out. But who did you write this book for?
This book has been a long time in the making. It's probably been 5 years. It was a bit of a COVID project. And you'll see, it's good. I've got my prop here, my book. But you'll see it's not a normal kind of book. It has a lot of images of objects and of, pictures of me getting ready to go to the state visit dinner that was hosted by Obama while I'm trying to finalize the text on climate. So it's got like random things in it, but it's intended for a much broader audience. It's really intended to inspire women and girls and young people. And I think that's particularly important right now because I work on climate and I think it's really hard. Do people here care about climate? Yes, I imagine here. You care about climate? I actually think most Canadians do because they understand the wildfires and they see the smoke and people are being evacuated from communities and you can't get insurance if you're in a flood zone. But I do think in particular we need to bolster spirits. But also it's a book, it's really about how to make change. It's not like people think it's like a political memoir. So I think, fancy people in politics will look at the end of the book to see if their name is there and maybe be disappointed if it isn't. But it's not really that kind of book. It's like I was a kid from Hamilton. I didn't want to be a politician. That wasn't my dream when I grew up. I wanted to go to the Olympics for swimming. And spoiler alert, I did not make the Olympic team, but I went to Olympic trials.
You're close.
I was
sort of close.
Closest, but it wasn't, life is a journey and it wasn't sad that I didn't make it, but I think it's just to hopefully for people to think I can make change too. Like I didn't come as a fully formed politician that was, destined to be Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. So in particular for women and young people who are trying to figure out how to make change, I think it's a little bit my story. I just tried to figure it out. And one day I decided the best way to make change was to go into politics and get rid of Stephen Harper. That was my goal. He was my inspiration, yes, because we needed a new government. So I really, really, really am trying to reach a much broader audience because I think we often are politicians talking to a very narrow group of people, often very partisan, and that's not my deal. My deal is we need everyone to be making change in their own way. And I want people who are feeling like maybe it's a bit hard working on climate or on in politics or on democracy or human rights that you too can make change.
And you were holding it up. It's a bit of a scrapbook. You've described it, and it's also honest. There was some media coverage of it that was sort of saying, "Oh, you said this about Trudeau, calling him a loafer," and there's a certain honesty about. I've lived in politics, and I'm going to call it like it is. But what I find most interesting is not the sort of the gotcha coverage after the fact. It's when you go to write something. You said you're not a writer at the launch that I saw in Ottawa, but you obviously sat down and were trying to figure out what are the lessons learned. You had successes, you've had failures, and you're trying to impart these lessons learned. You mentioned it. You sort of were going down that road a little bit of what you wanted to impart to people. But you had 6 years in politics at the upper echelon of decision making on a really important file. Not all. I want to get to some of the failures because we're living through some of them right now. I think not of your doing, of conservative doing, unfortunately. But what would you say are the lessons learned that you as you're crystallizing the moments you lived through? What are those lessons?
It's funny because the lessons I learned actually are from swimming in a way that actually you got to do the work. That, you set a long-term goal and, whatever that goal is, whatever you hope to make change on, and then you get up and you do the work. And then you get up the next morning and you do the work again. And sometimes things won't go your way. But you still get up the next morning. And I think it's important because we'll talk, I'm sure, about carbon pricing. We lost the consumer carbon price. There's a chapter, it's called Hard Things Are Hard. I'm also really into slogans. I used to be the captain of the U of T swim team. So I feel like my whole life is like a Nike ad or something. Hard things are hard. We can do it. I think that the change is incremental. And sometimes in life, you're going to have hard times. But the other thing I want people to take from it is that, sometimes you can just go dancing with your friends, right? Or you can call up your book club. I would sometimes have hard days in politics. And I was like, oh gosh, that was what? And what happened? So I'd send an email. It would say to my book club. So if you have book clubs are a good thing. Even if you don't always read the book, that would be me. But I would be SOS, come to my house. And I'd be like, all I have is chips and wine, but I just need to hang out with regular people. And I think that's also important. Life is life. You got to do the work if you're really trying to make change. But some days are going to be harder, and sometimes you're just trying to hang in there. And I have 3 kids. One of them, they're older now. One of them is actually manning the booth, selling the books. But, when you're a mom too, sometimes you're going to focus on that. So I don't know. I think my lessons are, I'm too Gen X to be you've got to do this and I learned this and I'm amazing. No, that's
You're not writing a graduation speech.
I'm not writing a graduation speech. And I don't know that, the particular path I took is what anyone else is going to do. I went to Indonesia to do a documentary about Komodo dragons because my roommate asked me to. So that led me to go back to Indonesia, which led me to work for UN peacekeeping mission in East Timor. But I think it's also take risks if you're a young person. People will tell you all the time how you should do things. And I, often, doubted, should I do this? Or I didn't have enough confidence. And I think that's women often feel like that, I'll say. And, at the end, sometimes you are right. And it's okay if your parents don't like exactly what you're doing, or, people say you should stay in corporate law, which I hated, or, so I don't know if there's so many lessons as one, you got to do the work. 2, listen to what you really want to do. That doesn't mean every day you're going to get to do what you want to do. But, if you're really passionate about working on human rights, work on human rights, figure out a way to do it. And then also have some fun. Life can feel really heavy. And I felt that during COVID. I think sometimes now after, looking at, social media and what Donald Trump has done or threatened to do, it can feel hard. So I think it's also okay to just check out and have fun.
I like it. Well, there aren't lessons, but here are 3 important lessons. It's good.
I am a politician.
It's good. Well, it's okay. You mentioned a few times really writing this book in a way to young people, and specifically to young women, to encourage them to make a difference and to get involved. And yet, politics, we were both drawn to politics, I think, for similar reasons. And it is one of the most important ways to make a difference. And I want to get to, there are other ways to make a difference, of course. But there's a bit of a tension, I think, in what you're writing, because you're writing this encouragement to make a difference, and politics is so important. And on the flip side, you document all sorts of different ways that politics has been truly awful. The absurdity of, I knew the ridiculous idiocy of climate Barbie, but I didn't actually appreciate that you had these bizarre men coming to your house to take selfies in front of your house. That's just the next level awfulness. And so, how do you, when you're talking to young people, to encourage them on the one hand, but also you don't want to shield them from the awfulness, and we all want to make politics a more civil, better place, but these are problematic tensions.
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought a lot about what I wanted to say about like the hate and abuse that I got, but also my staff got. I mean, they come to my office and start screaming, and of course, everything's videotaped. So, and you know, there were incidents at my house, and so. First of all, I believe in being honest. Like, I just believe in it. I believe that people deserve the truth. But also in this case, I wasn't looking for sympathy. I'm out of politics. I don't need sympathy, but we need change. And so I think one of the only ways we get change, and you know how hard it is to get policy, like online harm legislation. We still have not gotten online harm. In a way, it's kind of unfathomable that we can't just get it. Like, we know that online...
C5 happened real quick, though. Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. Well, luckily I'm not in politics anymore. I'm not in politics anymore. I just do my thing. But I do think that by documenting this, I'm hoping that people will read it and say, well, wait a minute, that's not okay, because that's how we will get the support to get legislation to, you know, make sure that we hold social media platforms accountable. That's the way that we will be able to get people to say to politicians, you cannot go and do personal attacks and then go spread them online to get clicks. And that we can get proper protection for politicians, which I don't love, but actually we need it sometimes. So I think that it is important to say that. I don't want people to feel down, because I have multiple purposes in the book. Like, people are talking about this, and I've had a number of my female politician friends saying thank you for stepping up, because now people are taking it more seriously, because they're like, wow, that was bad. Like, Climate Barbie sounds kind of quaint now, but Climate Barbie led to a whole bunch of things that led to a bunch of things that led to RCMP finally being outside my house, which wasn't amazing, but at least I felt safe.
But it's one thing to say quaint, but it normalizes a misogyny that is awful, right?
Yeah.
So it might not be a direct threat. It might not be taking a selfie outside of your home, which is an implicit threat, but it's normalizing an awfulness in our politics.
Yeah, I mean, it
from
is,
other politicians. It was a former minister in Harper's cabinet who started it, right? It was, or at least amplified it.
We'll go there, like the Climate Barbie. Okay, so Climate Barbie it's quite weird, because now my kids are like, well, Barbie went to the moon. Barbie was an astronaut. Quinn is here, like, you know. Barbies are like, you know, not that big a deal. The thing is, if you are my age, if anyone here is 50 or over, I think you're pretty clear when someone who's 50 or over calls you Climate Barbie. There's a lot going on in that. And I said nothing. Like, I was actually baptized Climate Barbie very early on by a rage farming alt-right outlet. They are not media, and that's what they do. This is their game. They go after progressives to make money, actually, for clickbait. But I didn't do anything for so long. And because my team was lovely, and I had a lot of really awesome women, and they're like, just don't do it, because you'll look weak. They'll know that, you know, they can go after you. And so I'm at the UN. Actually, it's like 7 years ago. I was just at the UN last week. Yes, I heard Donald Trump, but I was there to work on climate. But it was the same thing. It was the end of a really long day. I was going back to the hotel. I was actually in the hotel lobby, some crappy hotel, with my team. And I look at my phone. I was like, why is my Twitter exploded? What has happened? And then I see the Climate Barbie tweet. And I said to my team, I said, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to deal with this situation. And they knew, like, when I say I'm dealing with it, I'm going to deal with it. And so I'm a lawyer by training. So I am Irish. So I've got the hot-headed side, and then I've got the lawyer rational side. So I was like, okay, what am I going to say that's going to call it out, but in a way that isn't falling into the trap of just calling names? So I said, it's in this book. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it was something like, would you use that kind of language with your girlfriend, wife, mother? You're not chasing women out of politics. Your sexism is going to chase women out of politics, whatever it was. And what was so interesting about this, and this is why in this book I do the same thing, is that it went viral. And I wasn't trying to do this. I was trying to shame him so he would stop. And people would stop me in the streets, and it would be, conservative men. They'd be like, I'm a conservative, I'm ashamed. This is not acceptable. And I really appreciate this. This is how you stand up to bullies. And I thought, oh, this is important that we do this every once in a while, because often as a woman, you're kind of supposed to take it, because otherwise you look a bit weak. And I realized, actually, the power is other people saying that this is not okay. So
yeah, exactly.
I actually appreciate that you call it out. You will see in my book. Let me see if I can find it. I also, kind of bizarrely, a bunch of like men would send me Barbies with really mean notes. So they'd go to a store, buy a Barbie, then go and find the address of my constituency office or my ministerial office, and then send it with a note that they personally addressed. Like, that's kind of weird. So anyway, the funny thing is, I guess, is it funny? I don't know. It's just it. There's a Barbie. This is actually a picture of one of the Barbies that was sent. We would normally put our Barbies in the Christmas toy drive because we figured might as well give it to kids that would like the Barbie. But I found one when I was cleaning up my office, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna just keep that. I'm gonna just keep that. So
no one sent me Barbies. I have a book of just
no one's sending you Barbies.
Glorious things that people have sent, like written notes that people have sent over the years, where you're just like, this is the most bizarre thing to have received. And in 10 years in politics, this scrapbook grows. But speaking of, you mentioned Harper being an inspiration of sorts. You also have said, I'm just a regular person who wanted to make a change. And politics, you also said, I didn't want to be a politician, I want to be an Olympian. But you also document Sheila Copps as someone you looked up to. You mentioned your dad being very political, and Pierre Elliott Trudeau was, the person in politics who was a bit of an inspiration for your dad and family. And so Harper, obviously, motivating force for me as well in the lead up to 2015. I think there's a whole class of us in the lead up to 2015 that wanted a different kind of politics. How did you get on the ballot, though? It was, you were a lawyer and you thought, no, this is this particular moment. Were people tapping you on the shoulder and saying, come on, Catherine, now's the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny story because women often have to be asked multiple times. The thing is, I'd already been asked before 2015, and it was kind of funny because I saw my friend last night who's part of the story. So when Stéphane Dion was running, I went back to Hamilton, so that's where my parents, my dad passed away, but that's where my parents lived. And I was walking up my street, and one of the head of the riding association is like, "Would you like to run?" So it was the election. I think was already called. I'm pregnant. I live in Ottawa, and so I was like, "Oh, maybe I should think about that." So I asked my friend. He's like, "Well, I guess you won't have to knock on doors." So that was my first time getting asked. I did not run then. But I ran a charity that did human rights, rule of law, and good governance. I'd started this charity after having lived abroad with a friend. And I mean, it was like banging your head on a wall in the pre-Harper times. Like, we were trying to, support human rights. We were working with Indigenous youth in Canada, focused on reconciliation. I cared about climate change. I was like, all of these things I'm trying to do outside of the system are a complete and utter waste of time. So I thought, okay, we got to get rid of the government. So that's my theory of change now. My theory of change was create this charitable organization, and it's just not getting the impact. So I decided I was going to run, but I was in Ottawa Centre. So I don't know if many of you know Ottawa Centre. It's actually where Parliament's located, so it's great. It's a bike ride to work. But it was Paul Dewar, who was a really beloved NDP member of Parliament. His mother had been mayor, and I really like Paul too. But the reality is you got to win, right? So you got to win enough seats so you can form government. So I ran for 2 years. And it's interesting because I just decided to run. Like, I canvassed, and so maybe the women, this will maybe resonate a little bit. So I was like, okay, I really want to run, but I kind of need permission. I don't know why I thought I needed permission, but I did. So I went the rounds. And I like the Liberal Party, but it can be like an inside club. And I wasn't from Ottawa Centre. And so I think people were like a bit perplexed. They're like, we're kind of keeping this riding for a star candidate. And I was like, okay, what the heck? Who's a star? Like, what's a star candidate? Is that like a male lawyer who gives a lot of money to the Liberal Party? Like, I was like, seriously, what is a star candidate? Okay, sorry. I don't know. You are a male.
I ran when I was 29. I had no.
That was a setup. No, it wasn't. Okay. Anyway, we'll just blow by that one. You're a little bit unusual. Okay, so like we'll take you out of that. But anyway, it's quite funny because then I was like, and then people were like, actually, you should just get the party to go get you another riding that's winnable. So I was like, okay, on the one hand, you need a star candidate here for this great riding but on the flip side, no one can win. So I was like, okay, I don't really know. So I looked at, I'm not a fool. I was a competitive swimmer. I want to win. So I looked at we looked at the numbers, and I realized, if Justin Trudeau was then leader, if we did super well, we were in third place and it was 2 years out. But if I worked really hard and we did super well, there was a shot at winning. So I just decided I'm going to run. And I got the chapter is called the New Girls Club and then I had men supporting me. It was fine. But I literally had a lot of women who were just like, I don't know if you can win. This is kind of bonkers. You're doing it, but I'm going to step up and give you some money. I'm going to go help sell nominations. And at that point, you had to sell them. And like, no one wanted to buy a nomination. Like, people are like, I don't want to be a party. They're like, why do I want to join a party, especially, Liberal Party? It was a lot of, and so those of you who are thinking about politics, like, how do you win a nomination? Like, I was trying to sell memberships and people weren't buying them. Like, I was like, oh gosh, like every night I'm going out, I've got these kids and I'm going out and talking to people and, I'm spending 2 hours and getting 1 or 2 nominations, people signing up. So I actually realized it was my kids' friends' mothers whose names I didn't know. I just knew their kids. And I think they were like, wow, we don't really know anyone that would go into politics, but we actually think you'd be pretty good and your kids are kind of nice. And I don't know, I'll just sign up. I don't care. And so
of course.
It was actually really heartening. And I will say, like, for all the bad of politics, and there is some bad for sure, and you will read about it in my book, that campaign for 2 years, like, we knocked on more than 100,000 doors. We had the highest voter turnout in the country. I had my own rules. Like, I was like, we're going to do this in the way that I believe in. And, some of it was following the Obama snowflake model. Like, we wanted to run hard, but we also engage kids. And it wasn't like we had just like a kid area. We would have kid canvases. And I just felt important to me. And we went to low income parts of the riding where some people said they're not going to vote. Or we went to university residents. They're like, they're not going to vote. Actually, they turned out in strong numbers. And I got a ton of volunteers who, and people that knew my name because like someone who knows someone who knows someone. So it was great. But I will say, like, that's the one thing about getting involved in politics. You may be here. I met a couple of you younger people who said you'd like to run. You can do it. You don't need permission. You're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to build your team. But this isn't an in club. And I do sometimes worry that politics feels like an in club, and it shouldn't be that. Like, we need everyone who wants to step up and get involved in however they want to get involved to be able to do that. And so that's my lesson. Read that chapter. Hopefully you feel quite inspired. And when I knocked on the last door, I didn't know if I would win or not. But I knew we'd left it all on the ice. And I felt great. Like, I was like, we also have another woman who has run here. It's Kelly, is it? Kelly, who's run a couple times. You know what it's like you build a team. Now, you were in a super hard riding. I do hope you run again. But it's just this feeling of doing something that matters and bringing people together in a common cause that is bigger than yourself. And it's about believing you can improve lives and you can tackle climate change. So that was great. I hope you read it and feel like you can do it too if you want to run, because you can. I will say you got to work hard. That is one of the most important things. Doors. Got to knock on doors.
Well, so I want to get back to, though, you were emphasizing, this idea of an insider culture, but at the same time, the need to have a really local presence. And it was people who were on the ground in the community who ultimately helped get you over the finish line in the nomination. I mean, here, Sandy's working the bar. I went to high school with his kids, and he signed up in the nomination. You got
Sandy, and he got us a beer.
And you got Claire and Fred here, who again I went to high school with their kids, and they signed up in the nomination, probably for joining the Liberal Party for the first time. And you go down the list, and there are people who are behind you locally, and in part, I think when you get started, now you go, okay, well, I know this person in the party, I know that person in the party. I've lived in the party for 12, 13 years, but I was 29 when I was starting around the nomination. No one was tapping me on the shoulder and going like, you're a star candidate, whatever that means, as you say. And so it does require that desire to say, no one has to ask me, I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to build my own local team. But it also gets, I think, at another tension of who is your team, because you say at one point, sometimes you need to be on the outside so you can push the inside to do more. And so you're on the outside now, and you can be probably more honest in your assessment of things and more critical. I have tried, though, at times over the 10 years to play that same role in caucus.
What is this?
And
What, Nate? I thought you were always like all in on everything.
yeah, all in on everything. But it does get to this idea of team. It's like be a team player, be a team player, be a team player. And the answer back is, well, who's your team? And yeah, sure, of course the team is the Liberal caucus, but the team is also people in Beaches East York, the people who are knocking doors within the nomination, people who are knocking doors in the election, and they also want accountability. They also want the party and the government to be the best version of itself. And so, do you find when you think back at the 6 years that you were in politics, I mean, cabinet's a different level of solidarity, obviously, but do you think it's possible to navigate that, critical accountability role inside the tent, or do you think it's essential as you are now to be outside to play that, that truth function?
I mean, that's a really hard question because I'm a team person. I just am. Like, I was captain of our swim team, but that doesn't team. So it's different. Like, I'll just have to distinguish, like, being in cabinet, like,
yeah, it's
you do have cabinet solidarity,
sure.
But in cabinet, let me tell you, like, I spoke up, right? Like, people didn't always like it, but I felt like I had an obligation to just say things. And that was as much to myself as it was to anyone else. But then once you do that, there is this view that then you stand with the team or else you leave cabinet. That is hard. But it's probably less hard than being in caucus where you feel like you might have less influence on the issues. The one time I felt this was actually when I was out, but it was hard to do. And this is when I spoke up and I said I felt it was time for Justin Trudeau to step down, to have a leadership race to allow someone new to come in. And it was funny because I got like all these texts, and I was out, right? So you think, not such a big deal. But I got texts from people and saying, who do you think you are? We're a Liberal team. And I was like, okay, this is weird because I get team, but team doesn't equal cult.
And welcome to my world.
Nate and me, are we exactly the same? Probably not exactly the same, but no, but I think it's true because I was like, well, wait a minute, we also owe it to, in that case, it was also we got to win. Are we going to just go, is this the way it's going? We're just going to allow us to go down, even though, it's clear that the wheels have come off the cart. And that was hard. But I thought about it and I was just so worried about the other option, Pierre Poilievre. That was too much. And I was like, okay, if I can make a bit of a difference, I will take a hit. It's fine. But look, it is really hard to navigate that. And obviously if it's super chaotic and no one's supporting things, the government will fall and you can't get agendas through. There does have to be some leeway to say things. That is important. It's that line and the tension. And I know you've felt it. And, we haven't always been on the same side of those things probably. But that is hard. And I don't know that there's any easy answer to that because you can't always be in opposition because you can't govern. So I don't know. I would actually put that to you, Nate. No, but I think it's an interesting question for you because as I say, I was in cabinet, so it was a little bit easier. You literally have to vote with the government.
Yes.
But for you, there were times that you decided to, be your own voice and not necessarily, not support, the government's position. How did you make decisions on that? How do you decide this is the moment I'm going to do that? Sometimes I care, but I don't care as much. Or maybe I've done it, a few times and I should stay together. How do you make that choice?
So I think that Trudeau, in running for his leadership, one thing that drew me to him, actually, he was calling for generational renewal at the time, which appealed to me. But he was also talking about doing politics differently, and whether that promise was entirely realized or not. You lived around the cabinet table. You know more than me in some ways. But I would say the promise of freer votes was incredibly appealing to me as the kind of politics that I want to see. Because I do think you want that grassroots politics. You want people to be, it sounds trite now, but that idea of being voices for the community in Ottawa, not the other way around. But there's a truth to that. And so how do you get there and also maintain unity? And I think they navigated that quite well when in the leadership, and then it became part of our platform in 2015, he articulated this idea of, well, we're going to have whipped votes on platform promises. Do I agree with everything in the platform? No, but I'll bite my tongue. where I disagree, and I'll certainly vote with the government. 2, on charter rights and human rights issues, and then 3, and this is more fraught, but on confidence matters. More fraught, I say, because there were moments where they made certain things confidence matters that I didn't think they should have. But that was the deal, and that was the deal that you make with constituents. It's the deal that you make with members of the Liberal Party. Beyond that, I think it's more about how you go about disagreeing, and then it's making sure that you've given notice, making sure that you've explained your reasons. I've joked I've been on many different whips' couches, but Andy Leslie I thought was the best whip, in part because he would say, "Why are you doing this?" And you'd run through the reasons. He goes, "Well, have you engaged with them? Like, do they know? Yeah. Well, have they tried to convince you otherwise? Yeah. But here are the reasons. Okay. Well, sounds like you thought about it, kid. Get out of my office." And you could tell why he was an effective general, because he built respect as between you. Whereas, the other approach is you have to vote with us, but that's not the deal. And here's why. And it's a less effective approach from a whip. But I would say I've used the example of electoral reform. I wasn't, going and doing media saying Justin Trudeau is an awful person for breaking this promise, and this is the most cynical thing he could have possibly have done, and what a bait and switch. I wasn't burning bridges and making this personal. I was saying, he doesn't think a referendum is a good idea. Here's why I think there's a better path forward, and here's why I think here's a way of us maintaining that promise, and here's why I don't think we should have broken the promise. And different people in the Liberal Party have different views. So I think the way we go about disagreeing and creating space for reasonable disagreement within the party, outside the party, but especially within the party, really matters. And then sometimes you just have to say, there's an old Kurt Vonnegut line. It's, we are who we pretend to be, so be careful who you pretend to be. And I think it's doubly true in politics. And so, you want to wake up after politics and think, I did the thing I was supposed to do when I was there. And sometimes that means, being a good team player, and other times it means standing up and saying what you think. Okay, but back to questions for you.
Do you like that one? That was pretty good. Eh? Just put Nate on the hot seat for a little bit.
You can ask me questions too. Okay, so I was going to ask you why not politics, but you've sort of said, I've heard you say you felt that you were done. You did what you came to do. But I want to push back on that a little bit, because you did a lot of the things in terms of, especially around climate. First climate plan, you put carbon pricing in place, a number of measures. I mean, that gets all the attention, and we can talk about the walk back on it. But there's stringent methane rules. There were major investments in public transit. There's a clean electricity. You run down the list of different things that we've worked towards in advance. Broadly, and then we talk about consumer carbon pricing, but the industrial carbon piece is huge. Having said that, do you worry you left at a time when the politics were toxic, but not as toxic as they are today around climate, and certainly around carbon pricing? And do you feel like you left before you had made sure the gains were going to be protected?
I think the lesson I learned, you can never protect gains. Right? Like you're just going to always have to fight. And like, I can't, like, what am I going to be in politics? So I'm like 120, like, sorry. Like, and it is really true. Like the weird thing so I'd been through COVID. I had 3 teenagers, one who, as I mentioned, is here. And I really thought hard. Like, I turned 50. And like, I'm not someone who's like big birthdays. It's like this existential thing. I wasn't sad. It was like, whatever. But I was like, okay, I'm 50 now. Like, there's, what do I want to do at 50? I really forced myself to do it. And I really felt like, remember, I got into politics to make change. So I just thought, what is the best way to make change? And I really felt I felt personally for myself at this point, it wasn't through politics. I really wanted to work globally on climate because I really felt we'd done a lot. And I did think we kind of landed carbon pricing. We'd gone through 2 elections and one at the Supreme Court. So I felt like, okay, people will keep it. We will be able to keep it. So I just felt that there were other things I wanted to do. And I'd really come I said I would leave when I had done what I'd come to do. And that was a really important promise to myself. And I really want to spend time with my kids. Like, you give up a lot in politics. And my kids were going off to university. And I've been through COVID, and if any parents have anyone been through COVID, but if you're a parent like of teenage kids, that was like a pretty bleak time. Like I'd be like, do you guys want to play another game? Like, yes. Like, oh my God, as if, and then they go to their bed, they'll be like, I'm doing school, like, and I'd be like, as if you're doing school, you're online, probably like playing video game, but what am I gonna do, right? Like, let's go for another walk. They're like, okay, we'll go for a walk if we can go get a slushie. And I was like, I'm gonna rot their teeth. And my dad was a dentist, so I was like, this is bad, but this is like, we're engaging for 20 minutes. Like, it was really hard. And so I actually, when I made the decision, like, but the funny thing that is so hilarious now to me is I was like, I'm not going to leave, because if I leave, those haters will think they drove me out. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stay. And like, it was bizarre. I was like, okay,
I don't want to stay when I'm staying.
I don't want to stay. I don't think this is the most useful point of my, like, part of what this is this useful, but I'm going to stay because these random people that I don't care about are actually going to say, haha, I chased her out. So then I was like, okay, well, let's actually be rational here and, an adult. So I made the decision. And I actually felt really zen. Like, it was quite weird after I did it, where it was actually politicians who would do it to me. They'd be like, are you okay? And I'd be like, I'm amazing. What are you talking about? And like, it was as if leaving politics, I would not be okay. And then people would say like, is it hard not to have staff? I was like, I'm actually free. I can do whatever I want. Like, I can go to a microphone now and say whatever. Probably people will care a lot less, but I don't.
You can do that in politics sometimes too.
Yes, Nate. Yes, Nate. We know about that. Yeah, it was just, so anyway, I left politics. I do think that what I always worried about more than actually the haters thinking they won, it was that women and girls would think I left politics because of all the hate.
Yeah.
And once again, I'll just repeat it because it's very important to me. The reason I say the things that happened to me in the book is not because I need sympathy. I don't. We do need change. And I felt when I left, I said I would support women and girls in politics. One of the ways I am doing it is making sure that it is a better place than what I had to put up with. Now, sadly, it's not, because it's actually worse now. I hear from counselors, I hear from school board trustees, I hear from all sorts of women in politics, but also men, however you identify, like it's bad out there. And it's not just online, it is now offline. People think they can shout at you and scream at you and take a video of it, like put it in the dark web or wherever that goes. So, that's bad. But I feel like, people are like, oh, we got to stop that. And that's what's important. There's a nice letter here. So as I said, I have like random things in here. But there's this lovely gentleman named Luigi. I haven't talked about Luigi yet, have I? So I was at the airport, and this gentleman came over to me, and I still get a little nervous when people, because I don't know what people are going to do, right? Like probably 99% of them are very nice, but it only takes 1%. So I always get like slightly nervous, and I don't mean to be, because I'm actually, as you can see, quite gregarious. I like talking to people, but never exactly sure. And he hands me a note and walks away, and I'm like, oh God, is this like an exploding letter? Who knows? And I open it, and it's in the book, so I'll read you his letter, because it actually, I put it towards the end because I think it's really important, because you can see, I asked Luigi if I could put his note, so his note is here. So, Ms. McKenna, I did not want to disturb you, so I thought I would write this note instead. Because I identify as a conservative, in all likelihood, we probably would disagree on many issues. I find it quite disturbing the level of abuse that you and many other female politicians must endure. It is unfortunate and unacceptable, and I make a point of speaking out when I see it. I hope that you take consolation in the fact that you and others like you are making it easier for the next generation of women, including my 3 daughters. Luigi. And I was like, this is like the nicest note. And I think that's also what I hope from my book. Like, I hope people are like, yeah, we can actually disagree, but be normal and, okay with each other. And probably most people are. Most people are like Luigi, or probably not paying attention, but there are people that aren't doing that. And I think they're also fed sometimes by politicians themselves, who, really ratchet things up and attack people personally. And so That's a long answer to, I can't even remember the question, but I left politics and I was done, and that's not related to Luigi, but Luigi's a nice guy.
I think I've got, those are my questions around the book, but I do have a couple questions on climate policy because you're living and breathing that still. And although it's interesting you comment about politicians, I mean, there's a deep inauthenticity sometimes where politicians treat it as a game, and there's these attacks for clicks, or in some cases, especially when the Conservatives were riding high in the polls, people were tripping over themselves to try and prove to the center that they could be nasty to and that they could score points and all of that, and so they all wanted to make cabinet by ratcheting up a certain nastiness, but then cameras get turned off and they turn into human beings again to a degree. And so that kind of inauthenticity, I think, sets a real nasty tone for others in politics more generally. But on climate policy, I was in Edmonton for our national caucus meeting. I think I texted you this, but I get scrummed by reporters and they were asking me all climate questions. And I was like, oh, this is nice. I'm getting asked climate questions for a change. This is good. This is put climate back on the radar. And then a reporter says, well, are you concerned about the Carney government backtracking on climate commitments? And I said, well, backtracking on climate commitments, I mean, if you read the book Values, it would be a very odd thing for us to do. Do you worry that we are backtracking? Do you worry that we're not going to be ambitious enough? Or do you think we haven't yet seen the climate competitiveness strategy? I mean, here's an opportunity to say we should do much more. I don't know, but are you concerned, just given the dynamic in politics as they're unfolding, that we are not going to get where we need to get?
I mean, look, I'm like you. First of all, I did get into politics. I wasn't an expert on climate, but I cared about climate because I have kids. Like, we have this truck that's coming for our kids, and I'm a mother, so I'm going to do everything I can. I was in a position that I learned a lot about climate policy, and climate policy is complicated, and you got to get it right. But look, I mean, Mark Carney knows as much about, climate as an economic issue as anyone. And so, I'm certainly hopeful that you can take different approaches, but in the end of the day, your climate policy requires you to reduce emissions because climate change isn't a political issue. Of course, it's very political. Like, I'm not going to understate it. I know that as much as anyone. But in the end, the science is the science. We've got to reduce our emissions. And you've probably all heard this rant of mine before, but I will bring up my rant again. Like, I sometimes hear, about a grand bargain with oil and gas companies. We did a grand bargain with oil and gas companies.
How'd that work out?
Yeah, how did that work out?
Tell us, how did it work out?
Let me tell you how that worked out. So we were working really hard to get a national climate plan. And I saw it as an obligation of mine to work with provinces to build on the policies they had. The Alberta government had stood, so it was the government of Rachel Notley, but with Murray Edwards, who's the head of one of the oil and gas companies, with environmentalists, with economists, with Indigenous peoples, saying, okay, this is the climate plan Alberta's going to do. A cap on emissions from oil and gas, a price on pollution, tough methane regs, and some other things. And so then we were pushed, and it was really hard. I was Minister of Environment and Climate Change, where we had a climate emergency one day, and then we had a pipeline the next. I talk about that. That was hard. But the reality is we felt like that, the Alberta government, we needed to support the NDP Alberta, the NDP government at the time early on. And so then what did we get? Like, where are we right now? We basically, either those policies are gone or not effective. We got a pipeline at massive taxpayer costs. It's like 500% over.
Yeah, insane.
We have
price,
oil and gas companies that made historic record profits, largely as a result of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. What did they do with those profits? They said that they were going to invest in climate solutions. They were going to reduce their emissions. They were all in. But instead, they give their CEOs massive, massive historic bonuses. I'm from Hamilton. That's not a thing when you get these massive historic record bonuses. At the same time, They gave the money back to shareholders who were largely Americans, while they demanded more subsidies to clean up their own pollution while we are in a climate crisis that is a fossil fuel climate crisis. Like, I now feel taken for a fool because I believed that oil and gas, like in particular the oil sands, would live up to their end of the bargain. You will see in the book also, I don't know, I probably can't find the page fast enough, I did pinky promises with kids. Because all these kids came up to me all the time and they said, like, I'm really working hard on climate change. I've got a water bottle. I'm riding my bike. I'm doing like a used clothing drive, whatever it was. And I said, you know what? I'm doing my part too. Let's do a pinky promise, like a pinky swear, and we will promise to continue doing our part. Well, we all did our part. By the way, basically everyone in all sectors have done their part except for oil and gas when they had massive historic record profits. And I wrote a report for the UN Secretary General on greenwashing, and they were Exhibit A. Exhibit A on what greenwashing looks like saying you're doing things that you are not doing, and while you're lobbying to kill every policy. So I just hope that people aren't taken for fools again. Like, the grand bargain should be they should live up with their end of the bargain. Like, that is what bargains are. You got to do what you say you were going to do. And they didn't do it, and as a result, it's extremely hard for Canada to meet our target because they are 30% and growing of our emissions. So I also think, like, why are we paying? Why would taxpayers pay? So look, I don't know. Hard things are hard, as my mug says that I was given by my team, because I said it every single day, about 12 times a day. You have to make very tough decisions in government, and we're in a trade war. And also we have to absolutely stand up and defend our sovereignty against the Trump regime, which is very dangerous and very destabilizing. But at the same time, we can't not act on climate. Climate is a here and now problem. It's not this far problem. Like, all these people were evacuated from communities. The cost of climate change is massive. People are not going to be able to be insured. That's already happening. And so I just think you gotta walk and chew gum. You gotta figure out how to, build and grow the economy, but you also need to figure out how to tackle climate change and reduce your emissions. And to be honest, hold the sector that is most responsible for climate change accountable for their actions and also for their words, because they said they were gonna act on climate and they supported these policies, and they are now still fighting to kill all these policies. You almost can't make it up. And I just don't think Canadians should be taken for fools. And I think you got to make a lot of choices with tax dollars. But I'm not in government. And I think, we have, Mark Carney's, he's very smart. He's doing a great job of defending Canada. I think, like everyone, I'm waiting to see what the climate plan is, because it's extremely important. And the climate plan is an economic plan as much as anything else.
And on that, I would say not just an economic plan, but when you talk about national resiliency, there's a promise in our platform to become a clean energy superpower. There's a promise in our platform to create an east-west transmission grid. And just in Ontario, when you look at the fact that not only are they doubling down on natural gas, but they're also importing natural gas from the United States, when solar, wind, storage is actually more cost-effective, investments in east-west transmission grid and in clean energy would make it a lot more sense, not only for the climate, not only for the economy, but also as a matter of resiliency and energy independence as well. Okay, those are my questions, but I'm so thank you for give a round of applause for Catherine. Thank you for joining. With the time that we've got left, Christian, we got what, 10, 15 minutes? What time is it?
We're at 50 minutes in.
Okay, great. Okay, so does anyone have questions for Ms. McKenna?
Yeah,
Connor.
it's a question for both of you, actually. You guys have both been trailblazers in your own right, I think, inside and outside of politics. And you talk a lot about building your community and building your team, whether it's swimming or local politics, and also demanding space in those places to be competitive, all the way up from your local team up to the Prime Minister. But I'm curious, on the other side of that, what does it look like to be a good teammate inside and outside of politics, and how do we support more people, for those of us that might not be running but trying to get more people like you, or maybe as an example, somebody that supported you in your run?
Well, I mean, look, I'm trying to do my part. And so what I did, and it's like what most of you did, you go support people that you think are good that are running. So in the last election, I went and I supported people that I thought were serious about climate, including in ridings that we had never won before. And I also, well, probably especially those ridings, and I also supported women candidates. That was just a choice. I mean, but I think everyone getting involved in politics is a great way to do it. But also, when you think there's someone good that might be good to run, talk to them about it. And as I said, for women, they need to be asked often 7 times, I think is it. So like for women, maybe just start asking. And if we get to the 7th time, maybe really good women will run.
And I would add, I suppose, just on locally, I have found going into schools and talking politics and encouraging people to think about politics as an opportunity has translated into our youth council, has then translated into our young liberals internship over the summer, where we make sure people are able to be paid to knock on doors and just maintain involvement. And then, a number of those people come through either our office, and then they're working in politics in a minister's office or in the prime minister's office, or they're going to law school, or they're adjacent to politics and helping other people, and just encouraging people to at least be close to politics so that they see politics as a way to make a difference. There will then be people that will want to run from that or help encourage other people to run. The second thing, and I'll use Mark Holland as an example, when I was running the nomination and I didn't have contacts in the party, but I had someone who knew Mark Holland, and he gave me advice to think about it like concentric circles when you're running in a nomination, where you have people who are close to you, and then the people who are close to you will have 10 people that are close to them that maybe they can sign them up for you, or maybe they open the door. And if someone opens the door to a conversation with me, I feel pretty confident that I can close the sale. But if the door is closed in my face, I'm not gonna even have an opportunity to. And so just that idea of building out, you start with your home base and you build out from there. So I just think I have in the last week had conversations with 2 people who want to run for office at some point. They're both under the age of 30, and I've given that same kind of advice of here's what worked for me. It may work for you, it may not, it depends. But find where your home base is and then just grow from there. And so I think just spending time, like giving one's time to give advice like that is really important. Yeah.
Building on that, that's I wanted to, because I think that dovetails nicely into what you said earlier, Catherine, about really encouraging young women in particular to get into politics. But it's not just, it's all the peripheral people that are, peripheral to politics, your concentric circles, so that you don't necessarily have to run for an office. And I appreciate what you've done for girls, but I also want you to know that, I'm older than you, and still you are a role model to me. Not only that though, I have sons in their mid to late 20s, and I've made sure you're a role, and women like you are a role model to them, because I think that's how change begins. That's how.
This was entirely planted just for you, by the way.
No, but I think that, so I do think that's important, right? My book is not like, run like a girl. I'm a woman, I identify as a woman. And like, there's a story about how I was told I ran like a girl. And so it really bugged me. So it's a kind of a particular thing, but I think that is important. Like, this isn't exclusive. Although, there are, certain different barriers, at least that I'm aware of, that if you're a woman, if you're LGBTQ2+, if you're racialized or indigenous, there could be different barriers. But I hear you. And I think, we do have to inspire each other in a whole range of ways. So that is very nice. I hope that, I'm not, looking to, for kudos. It is nice to hear that you can inspire people in a whole different way, range of ways.
It's really not about kudos. It's about, it's not that, my intent is not just to applaud you, it's to recognize you, and that's different, like being seen, holding place, holding space for people to be involved. And so I do have one actual question of this.
You can ask a question after that.
Regarding pricing, carbon pricing, how would you communicate the rollout differently?
Well, I would actually fund it. So hard things and hard. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, we know the Conservatives were terrible. They lied about it. They misled. They didn't talk about the money going back. The problem is, like, we hampered ourselves too. And it was really quite weird because I was like, okay, well, we need an advertising budget because clearly this is a bit of a complicated policy. But the most important thing I need people to know is that we're tackling climate change and we're doing it in a way that we're going to leave low income and middle income people better off. You're going to get more money back. That's very, very important. The second part of the message is as important because I knew the Conservatives were going to be like, you're just increasing the price of everything. But we were told we couldn't advertise. And I was like, why? And they said, well, because we're not like Conservatives because they had done what was the plan?
Economic
action plan. And it
the signs everywhere. They basically,
it.
what Ford does now, they were doing.
So that sounds really good, except if you're me. Because I was like, well, no one really knows about it. So I'm like one person and, we got some caucus members, not all of them, but Nate will go out and talk about it. Some people will talk about it. But I said, like, people are entitled to know what government policy is, especially in this particular case where you've literally got to file your taxes to get the rebate, because that was the second mistake we made. I was told that we couldn't just do quarterly checks, which would be much more obvious to people, even if it was automatically deposited, if you actually named it properly, which was another problem. But, all of these things that are just normal things. And instead I was told by the folks in the Canada Revenue Agency, there's no way we could possibly do quarterly checks. After COVID, when we did everything, we blew everything up. Then they were like, oh, actually, and this was after me, but they were like, we can do quarterly checks. I was like, oh, that's really helpful. Like, that would have been nice, like a little bit longer, like the beginning of this. And so I think like we do need to be sometimes very tough. Like, don't do things that sound great and are really hampering your ability to actually deliver a policy in a way that people understand. So, like, it's just a hard policy. Like, people say, what would you have done differently? Yes, I would have communicated it differently. I tried. Like, I was out there. I went to H&R Block because I saw a sign and they were like, climate action incentive. Oh, by the way, we couldn't call it a rebate because the lawyers told us at Justice we couldn't do that. And I'm a lawyer. I was like, what? And so I should have fought that one harder too, right? Like, there's so many fights you can have internally as well. But, there I am. I was like, oh, H&R Block, they're doing free advertising for us because they wanted people to file their taxes. So then I said to all caucus members, you need to go to your H&R Block and get a family. I don't even want to see you necessarily. I want a family to be sitting down being told they're getting money back. And so, like, look, I think it's just a hard policy. And what happened though, read Hard Things Are Hard, but it's, and people will be like, I'm definitely not reading that chapter. You can skip chapters. This book is like, go back and forth, rip things out. You don't have to read it in chronological order or read particular chapters. But, the challenge was, if the price is going to go up every year you better be ready to fight for it, because every year you're literally creating this conflict point where Conservatives are like, they're on it. They're like spending so much tax dollars to mislead people. Remember the stickers on the pump that fell off? That was quite funny. They actually fell off. You're going to have to fight for it. And so it's a very hard policy. I did everything I could, and I don't live with life with regrets. I think it was really important. And by the way, it's a case study outside of Canada. Everyone's like, Canada. I was like, oh, yeah, there is a little different ending than you might want to know about what happened. But they're like, yes, this is of course how we should do it. Should be a price on pollution, give them money back.
I went to a movie at the beach cinema with my kids, and there was an ad. This is years ago, but there was an ad. So we were advertising, but it was advertising about the environment climate plan, and it was like people in canoes, and I was like, what is this trying to, like, we're spending how much money on this to tell me what exactly? And I went to Stephen was the minister, and I went, Stephen, can we please advertise carbon pricing works? It's 10+% of our overall plan, and 80% of people get more money back or break even. Just tell people those three things. I don't need the canoe. And then he was like, "Oh, we can't. They tell us we can't do it."
No, and that's what you're often told. Like, it is kind of weird internally the amount of times you're told no. Like, on advertising, it is a particular thing because, like, and so then you're like having a fight about comms. I was like, my gosh, can we just?
I don't think the canoe is going to win us carbon pricing, and it didn't. Turns out.
I love canoeing, by the way. So maybe it would have convinced me if I was.
I think last question we'll finish with Marilyn.
Hi. I'm Marilyn, and I also happen to be the president of the Ontario Women's Liberal Commission, and of course our
Woohoo!
yay women, and of course
And she's a former candidate.
oh, and I ran in 2022. It was a hard race.
Nice.
It was a hard time for all of us. Two things. I know, obviously, running with Trudeau and being in his cabinet, there was a large overemphasis on a gender balanced cabinet, and it's a feminist cabinet, and he's a feminist prime minister, and that's great. He did a lot for us to recognize the importance of having women at the table. But then, of course, it kind of feels like a little tokenistic, and maybe you're there because you're a woman, and it kind of undermines your competencies and your capabilities, and so I wonder if you can kind of reflect back, and also just mindful of like your title was like run like a girl, but we're mindful of like we want you to run because you can, and not because you're a girl, but because you're competent and capable, but just the tension that people might feel like we're running or getting opportunities just because we're women.
Did everyone hear that? Okay.
So, I mean, it's just impossible being a woman, right? Like, that's like what you said. You're like, oh my God. But that's how I felt, right? Like, on the one hand, so first of all, let me be very clear that when Justin Trudeau said this is it's going to be a gender balanced cabinet because it's 2015, I was like, amazing. Great. We're half the population. It's 2015. I kind of thought that was the point. The problem is then it was constantly repeated. And I don't want to diminish it. Like, I am a feminist, but I don't wake up every day and saying, woohoo, I'm a feminist. And now I was like, waking up every day and I'm like, I gotta do this hard job. I'm gonna go do it. And I also, like, the whole gender thing was so weird because on the flip side, then I'm climate Barbie. So I'm like, holy, how do we I just wanna be someone doing something in politics. However, we do need to break barriers. So having 50% women, I heard it when I was in Japan. This one woman in cabinet, she's like, I cannot believe how important it was to see when you guys made that announcement. So we can't diminish it. The challenge though is when you repeat something so much, like it's got to be about outcomes. And like, I'll give one example. Maybe it's not a fair example, but we said we've got a feminist foreign policy. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And we were going to have all these women peacekeepers. We never increased women peacekeepers at all. So we actually decreased our peacekeepers overall. So it was kind of weird because then people are kind of calling you out. And then, of course, the flip side, and we saw this, was that, when, the Prime Minister had conflicts with women, it was put into a frame of, well, he's not a feminist, even if the conflicts had nothing to do with the fact that they were women. So it is extremely fraught. And I don't have any easy solutions. I think that what is really important is outcomes. So childcare is really important, that we did childcare, that is a very important thing that we did, that we raised hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. That is a real thing. So also it is about what you deliver on in the real world. We also did, I was gonna say super nerdy, but I'm like a policy nerd. We did a gender-based analysis policy. That actually, we don't have to put that in the window, but when you actually think, how would policy affect people differently? That's actually a really good way of understanding is this a good policy? Is this gonna get the outcome? So, I mean, I think we did things. It is hard, and then people pick on my book. They're like, see, you call him out, and he's not really a feminist. I was like, oh my gosh, are we really getting into this whole thing? Although I did make the point that it did feel kind of heavy sometimes, where I was like, maybe I just got into cabinet because I was actually pretty competent, right? And by the way, cabinet is a bunch of people. They've got to find diversity of, regions. They got a whole bunch of things. And sometimes actually there are men that aren't that competent to get to cabinet. Cabinet is just a thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's hard. It is hard. And, it is a fraught space for sure. But I think, look, at the end of the day, you should be judged on outcomes. And I think we did a lot of good. We could have done more, but I think we did a lot of good on the gender front. It's just you don't always have to be out there calling everything feminist. Because when my book club was they're like, we're all feminists. They were like, but just free advice, could you just stop using feminist in everything you do? And I was like, I get it. So.
But I think just on that, I think you're right to emphasize the different diversities across something like a cabinet selection. I mean, we don't make a big deal in this country about the fact that you have regional diversity. It's just an established, accepted fact. Of course, we're going to have regional diversity in cabinet selections. Of course, you're going to look for gender equality in your cabinet because welcome to the population. I mean, it's my law school class. This is many years ago. Was like 52% women. Like, if just on the basic matter of competence, there's going to be lots of competent people to choose from, and that's just. I think your point is, if you you don't have to parade it around, just do the damn thing, because that's the thing we do. We don't parade around the fact we do geographic diversity. It's just that's the thing that's accepted that we do. Of course we do it. Of course you do gender equality. Of course you do. And then you focus on the fact that people in cabinet are competent and go do the damn job. And if you can't do the job, then we find someone else to do the job.
Yeah, I mean, I also just want to point out that, and I talk about this in the book, like, we actually had broader diversity than just gender and regional diversity. Like, we had people who were, had disabilities. We had people that were different religious groups. We had a refugee. Like, I'm not going to go on and on, but I mean, we got to represent the population. That's why, in fact, I was proud to be standing with the Liberal Party. We there are more things we could do on the diversity front, but we actually attracted a lot of candidates at a variety of different backgrounds, and that is how you do a better job of making decisions. And now I have to defend this now, not here with these folks, but people are like, well, I don't know, women on boards. Like, I was like, okay, no, it's not a woke issue. Like, I've got McKinsey reports. I'm going to give you 100 McKinsey reports because I'm literally not going to debate it. It just says that diversity leads to better decisions. That's just a thing. And like, we don't have to go back in time. Like, this isn't a woke thing. This is just like getting better outcomes. So I think it is important, but it is a complicated thing, and you don't overplay your hand on things. And then, unfortunately, when something happens, then suddenly you're like, well, you're not a feminist. Where I don't think that would have been said about others. It's just, it had been such a big deal. And so,
yeah, but like and also I think we just got to emphasize there are different kinds of representation. So there's descriptive representation. You want people in politics to look like the population for sure, but you also want this idea of add women, change politics. Sure, unless they're Margaret Thatcher. Like, it's like it depends. It depends who's there to stand up for equality, right? Like, you want 100% feminists, and you want them to be descriptively representative of the population, but also them all to believe in the things that matter when it comes to substantive representation of equality. So I think like we sometimes over-index on description instead of substantive representation of the views and values we want to see around equality at the same time. That's a whole other podcast.
100%.
Well, okay, so thank you very much. Catherine's going to hang around, and I think her daughter is selling books still. Is that right? Maybe?
I hope so.
Maybe?
I hope so.
But and I'll stick around too. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Catherine, for spending the time. And we will try to do more. So we do this podcast, and as I say, like, most of it, the focus is online, and the focus is, get it up on YouTube and get it up on Spotify. But it's nice to have an audience, and so we are going to try to do more of these in-person recordings at the same time. So keep a lookout for emails of what's to come, and if you have suggestions for guests or ideas, let me know. And thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nate.